Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 3, Episode 12, The Inside Man. Now in this episode, we get to see Talbot come back into play, and fortunately, at least by the end, he ends up being an okay guy. It was pretty cool the fact that, well, I shouldn't say it was cool, but it was good that he wasn't actually betraying Coulson, because pretty much his whole role in the series is that he's been sort of the douchey antagonist to the team, and he wasn't helping himself in this episode because he was being very, like, racially insensitive. And it was funny, but it was like, man, he's just, like, super racist. He's like, it's totally the Russian guy, and it's the Asian guy whose name or the Asian woman whose name I totally can't pronounce. And it was just like, holy crap, he's super insensitive. It was insane. But in the end, we find out that he's not actually working for Malick, which is really good because, like, ultimately, despite him being sort of douchey, he wasn't an actual villain. He really thought that S.H.I.E.L.D. was the enemy, like everyone did, because it was S.H.I.E.L.D., secret organization, typically only involved in the bad stuff, and pretty much everyone from Hydra was kind of, invisible, so it was all falling on S.H.I.E.L.D. But, fortunately, everything turns out fine. He gets his son back by the end. He's not actually the bad guy. Malick was just blackmailing him and threatening to kill his son off. Another thing that was interesting is that Krill came back into the show, and I didn't realize that Krill was not an Inhuman. I just assumed, like, oh, they thought he was something, because if I remember right, he was, like, the first villain that they fought in, like, the second episode of the series or something, and then he was in this season premiere as well. So it's like, alright, he's just a superhuman, and then we find out, the Inhuman stuff. It's like, oh, maybe that's what it was. And I don't really remember everything they told us about his story to begin with, because there was a lot of stuff, kind of going on. And actually, he maybe have been the first villain of this season, and maybe he wasn't in the last one at all. But, I just assumed that that's what it was, because that eventually led to the Inhuman thing, and it's like, oh, well, then, like, I guess that just means he's Inhuman. But they talk about the fact that he is actually the only human, at least currently, that, was able to get powers, but wasn't, like, completely changed. He's the only human to survive the terrigenesis process, and we find out that his body is actually the vaccine. Like, his blood is the vaccine for at least turning into an Inhuman. If someone's already turned, then that's one thing. That's just who they are now. But if if they are in the process, he can actually stop it with his own blood. And I thought that was an interesting concept, and it made me wonder if that means he's actually superhuman in his own right, and maybe that's why he got powers to begin with. It wasn't just the experiments, but they of course can't say mutant on here because of the whole file, the law stuff and everything with Fox. But maybe his mutant gene activated during those experiments, and that's why that really kicked in. So I don't know. They haven't really gone into a bit of an explanation. It's like it happened, and now he's the cure for it. If people choose to use him as the cure. But I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it was interesting. Seeing his powers again was actually pretty awesome. I think he has a really cool power. And he's pretty smart with it too. When he went up against Lincoln and he touched the tire and turned his whole body rubber, like, can't really get me now. So I thought that was actually really cool because it just showed how he does think when he's using his power. He's not just a brute character. And we find out that he has kind of turned a new leaf because of the whole thing with him being a villain was the fact that he was mind controlled by Hydra. But I realized a big character flaw for Hunter in this episode, which it happened because this is the second time they've done it. But whenever he wants revenge on someone for hurting people he cared about, he doesn't care about the mission. He will do what he wants because, of course, that was the big thing where, like, it didn't matter who was in trouble. And even when May was, like, right there, he was like, sorry, and, like, I got to kill Ward because he shot, the woman I love. He went really far to get that done, and he failed, and then all the crazy Lash stuff happened. Well, that was happening before that, but that's kind of how they figured it out. But he did that there, and then he did it in this mission. Like, as soon as he saw him walking away, it was like, he's a bad guy. Like, I'm about to go shoot him. I'm about to go kill this guy. And he instantly went off mission. He's in the room and everything. It's not like he was, like, headed to the room or he was, like, just walking in and getting ready. He was in the room, and he looked out to check on them. It's like, nope, screw the mission. I knew it, he's a bad guy, and so he's going after him. And then, of course, it seems like he was right, because I was like, he probably just went to pee or something, and then he hit him, and I was like, oh, he may have been right this time. And then it turns out he was actually still wrong, and he saved his life by snapping that guy's neck, which really surprised me. But I thought it was pretty cool, and it was interesting seeing that happen again with Hunter. It's like this is an actual character flaw with who he is, where he will abandon the mission to kind of get revenge, basically, because it's about the people that he cares about again. It's about the friends that he lost in the season premiere, and that's pretty much all it takes for him. It's like that's it. Or I guess that was last season. Yeah, that was last season. So I guess he did show up. That was season 2 when that happened. But it was just interesting. Like, I never, because it happened once. So I was like, a crappy moment, for him. But not exactly a character flaw. It was just he was at a point he'd never been at before. And then this was like the super watered down version where he had a lot of time, to process the death of his friends and stuff. And he had accepted him initially. He didn't want to. He kind of had no choice. But I was like, all right, he's on the mission and everything. And as soon as he sees him, it's like, I'm off mission. I'm out of here. I'm instantly just walking out of this room right now. So it was just kind of interesting. It was just like, okay, so this might show up again if something bad happens to somebody else. So I don't know. I feel like they kind of did that on purpose just to show that wasn't a one-time thing. He will instantly just drop the mission for revenge if he sees that he can get his chance. And if someone hasn't turned a new leaf, he'll just take them out if he can. So something to kind of keep in mind, really. I think it's something to keep in mind because they showed it again, even if it is the much more tame version compared to all the madness, that he went through when May was helping him find Ward. But I thought that was pretty cool, just as a random thing that may or may not show up again. Of course, we have the body of Ward. We have, Inhuman Ward. And I didn't know what to expect from this villain. I was like, okay, the end of the last episode, he has this weird thing where, like, cells come off his body and, like, it goes down to the bone and stuff. And they did a pretty cool thing in this one. I think the visuals for what they do with the weird cell effect, I don't even know what to really call it, when, like, makes it, almost he made an after image, which is interesting. But he, like, backed out of his own chest and left a bunch of cells there. And I'm guessing what he does is basically bond with other Inhumans, and he mentions they can't feed on their own kind, so that was interesting to know. But he I guess bonds with them because he puts his cells into the new guy who can, like, freeze people with his eyes. And then it kind of made sense because I was wondering, the guy who has, like, telekinesis, I was like, well, he knew what that guy's powers were, so why'd he do that and just flip the eyes right up and just stand there? And then afterwards, when Malick was like, don't leave him or anything like that, and he left, and as soon as he came out, he was like, I need you both to leave and give me humans. I was like, okay, he kind of, maybe it's either a form of bonding or maybe it's kind of like the symbiote a little bit, where it's like it takes over a bunch of different people, and once they get controlled by it, they kind of think they're doing their own thing, and they don't realize that subconsciously they're being forced to do it. So I feel like that's how it is a little bit. And they can still express themselves because the one guy mentions when they have the 5 humans, he's like, oh, they're innocents. So they still retain themselves, but I feel like based on what he did, they're subconsciously under mind control and they just don't realize it. They feel like, oh, we're just bonded better or something like that. But they instantly do what he wants. So I think that's a bit of mind control. By the end, he kills off the 5 people and becomes whole again, like the body's completely reconstructed and everything, which kind of sucks because I didn't notice it until this episode actually, but he actually had like a handprint from where Coulson actually crushed the bones in. I didn't realize that in the other episode where it was like a full-on handprint because it was a robot hand, so he like actually squoze and crushed them down. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I never noticed. I noticed obviously like the ribs and how his cheekbones, especially in this, they did a good close-up, and it was like his cheekbones were just like right in like that, like he was just completely void of any nutrients or anything. So he's back to like just no CG messed up body or anything. He's just physically fit so he could walk around and it won't draw attention or anything like that. But he completely wiped those people down to the bone, and then he's like covered in goop, which was super gross because whenever they do it in TV where someone destroys a body and it turns into something that we don't have inside of us, like he turned all this flesh and veins and blood into just brown goop. That's always just gross to me. It's like if it was blood or something, it would still be a bit gross, but it would be like that's inside of us as human beings. But it's like everybody turned into goop, And I was like, that's just weird. And not like everything, it was like just the meat and blood and veins and stuff like that. Brown goop. I was like, ugh, that is just nasty. That just made it nastier to me for some reason. But he's in, I guess, at full power. I mean, we still don't really know what his powers are. It's just a weird, separation thing so far. I would assume super strength has to be in there. Just because, I mean, it's just this thing that can, take over human bodies. It can exist when the bodies are completely dead on the inside until he actually rebuilds them. So I would assume he could, push beyond the typical limits of a human body, even if they're broken bones. He could just fight through that if he wanted to. So I'm guessing, basically super strength, he could ignore pain and just push the body, like, literally to the maximum. And probably beyond that, because it wouldn't, he could control the movement, so it wouldn't matter if the muscles were gone or not. Or, like, if they, just popped or something, crazy. So I would assume super strength. He clearly showed in this episode that he wasn't affected by the one guy who could, stare people down. So that didn't affect him. So possibly a complete immunity to powers. But it could just be the fact that it's a visual power and it's not a physical one. So something like Lincoln's ability would probably have a greater effect because it's an actual physical damage to the body. So that might be a bit different. But anything like telepathy, stuff like that, probably won't have any effect on him. So we'll have to wait and see if that's the case. Um, Either it's that where those type of powers don't affect him, or he really is like he's completely immune to all abilities. Like he almost cancels out abilities like the negative ability in a sense. So of course we'll have to wait and see how the heck that's supposed to play out. But it seems like he's making a bit of a move towards really becoming the full head of Hydra and really doing whatever he wants. And Malick now has this idea to um, get all the Inhumans in one place because he's kind of playing this guy who truly wants to help Inhumans, which is great. But then, unfortunately, he's working with Malick and it's like, oh, we'll brush past all that and just group all the Inhumans together so he can just, sacrifice as many as he needs to and probably just, kill off the rest. But I'm looking forward to seeing where they go, and I think it should be pretty entertaining. Um, they're really cool tech in this one. At least the glove thing, I thought that was actually pretty sweet. Just how that looked digitally when it made like the hand and stuff. I was like, that's actually very cool. I thought they were gonna make complete fake hands because I thought that's why they were doing it. He'd have to like switch hands every time he wanted to do that, but that makes way more sense to just make like a little, like a skin glove like on anyone's hand. So I thought that was a really cool little piece of tech. Like I said, Talbot was insane. It was funny, but at the same time, it was like, wow, he kept doing it, and he was just racist and insensitive. It was just like, man, that's just, like, it was funny a little bit, and then it was just like, wow, he's just got some major issues. That's what I think the worst thing he did, despite what he said to the woman about, like, oh, I don't just wear a dress for anyone, which is insanely insensitive. But when he said that, I was like, it's great to put a series of faces to all your unpronounceable names. That had to be the worst thing he said. Like, just blaming them because, like the one woman had a scar or something, or, I guess the second worst thing was the fact that the guy was just Russian, and that's why he was the enemy. So, aside from that, him saying, like, oh, it's great to put, faces to all your unpronounceable names. It's like, wow, that's probably the most offensive thing you could tell to anyone. Because that's, like, on an individual level. I don't know if I guess it depends on the person, but sometimes it's, like, just whole people or just individuals, like, wow, just so insensitive. But it was kind of funny. Um, like I said, though, I was glad that he didn't end up being just a full-on villain because I was like, alright, we can finally get to like him. And also, if they did that, then they'd have to get a brand new ATCU character, and it would be a completely new person like we've never seen before, or a new head of the ATCU, which would have to be a brand new character. So it was good that it worked out that way. He and Coulson finally have like a nice little moment, and he's like, you can call me Glenn occasionally. So they have an actual good moment at the end of this episode. Daisy and Lincoln have an interesting moment when they find out about the cure, and they talk about this whole birthright versus choice deal. And I thought that was really interesting because, we really see how deep into it Daisy really is, where it's like, this isn't a choice, it's our birthright and stuff. And then Lincoln hit with the perfect example where it's like, Lash, like, I'm pretty sure the doctor didn't want to have that happen to him. He just happened to be inhuman. He had no idea. He opened up a journal and poof, it popped into his face, and he turned into a monster that killed a bunch of innocent people. And I'm like anyone said, I'm sure he, like Lincoln said, I'm sure he would have wanted that choice. So, when they were first arguing, I was definitely more on Lincoln's side, and we got to see an interesting thing with Lincoln where his powers kind of act up when he's stressed, when he's in a confrontation and stuff like that. So, I like that they explained that at the end, where he's like, when we were at Afterlife, it was nothing. Like, I was with my own people. I knew what was going to happen here and there, and I just knew what was to be. And here, it's a bit stressful, and so when he's in confrontations, even when it's with Daisy, it's like, his powers act up a little bit. So I really enjoyed that. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. He's not, like she put, he's not exactly the Zen master she thought he was. And it just shows that despite him kind of, at this point at least, being like the character who has the inhuman information, he still isn't just like perfect. Like, I have full master over all my abilities and I know all the inhuman answers. He still has his own personal issues, and he's got, a lot of his people are gone now, and some of them became villains and he had to fight against them and stuff like that. So I really like what they did with his character as well, and I was definitely on his side during that argument, because and I know exactly what Daisy meant. Like, if the government got it, it would just be like full on X-Men, where it's like, vaporize all of them, like no more Inhumans, period. So she definitely had a great example. Of course, once again with the whole studio stuff, they couldn't exactly just be like, look at, the X-Men, because that would have been the perfect thing to say. But unfortunately, with legal laws and stuff, they can't just mention that part of the universe, which is literally the example that they could have used. Like, just look at the X-Men, because that's what the X-Men are about, is dealing with all the injustices and the government and stuff like that. So, despite not being able to use that, they had a great conversation anyway. That would have been a great reference, though, if they could have said that. Like, just, what about the X-Men? But definitely enjoyed the fact that they even introduced a vaccine. And they say, at this point, they say that it can't be to cure people, but I feel like they might find a way, or someone might randomly come in like, well, if we do this or this, it actually can completely reverse the process. And who knows, we might see how that plays out. That might play into whatever that final mission is that we got from the last episode, where, that ends up in space with the, for whatever reason, a blown up Quinjet. So it could play into that. Like, I think I'm going to look at that now. Every episode, if anything random that seems important is introduced, I'll be like, it might be this or that, in the mission. But I'm definitely looking forward to the next episode. Certainly enjoyed this one, but of course, definitely want to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And I want to know, what do you guys think is going to happen with this vaccine? Like, is it going to become a big part of the story? Or do you guys think it will just kind of fall to the wayside? Because with what they got out of this episode, and kind of where they ended the episode, where we have Bobby and Hunter on the airplane, I feel like it might lead to certain answers kind of getting out into the world, especially with them having the assassin coming into their base of operations. They might get the vaccine cure and then maybe reverse it or do something to it to make it into a weapon against other Inhumans, or maybe even enhance Inhuman powers to fight against, S.H.I.E.L.D. if, they take it to Malick. Because we technically don't know if this Inhuman is working for Malick, but considering he's the main enemy, unless they're going to be like, here's something else now, just basically towards the end of the season. Unless they decide to do that, I don't think we'll be getting a third party again. So I'm sure it's just going to be S.H.I.E.L.D. versus Hydra. Ultimately, it's kind of just how it is. But, if they wanted to, they could certainly add in a third party. It could just be a random person who just knows a lot of answers or something like that. But I'm assuming whoever this Inhuman assassin is going to be working for Malick. And I think, they could certainly find some stuff, depending on what they, do with the results and everything like that. They can get those answers and take them straight to Malick. But I do want to know what you guys think is going to happen with this vaccine. Is it going to be important? Is it going to be like, that was a cool thing, and then it'll show up every once in a while where they just, save it? Or, what do you guys think is going to happen with it? Personally, I think now that they've said that, I feel like that has to be at least somehow leading into what we're going to get for that final mission. Like, I feel like it has to either kickstart it, or they whatever, like the first vial or something, or the first batch, the enemies took it, and then they have to get it back. Crazy fight, mission, so that they can't possibly use it to either enhance powers or maybe cancel out our and the good guys, good Inhumans powers or something like that. But want to know what you guys think will happen to it, and of course what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.